Proverbs that we're studying together here is one of his writings, and that was followed by a writing called Ecclesiastes, in which he every chapter of the writing addresses one of the passions, the pleasures, the pursuits of mankind. And he ends up saying that all of our pursuits are futility. They're blowing in the wind. They are nothingness. And he comes down to the conclusion that the only thing that counts in life is God and our relationship with Him. And so he says this at the close of his writing in Ecclesiastes. He said this: not only was the teacher wise, that's speaking of himself, the Ecclesiastes, the preacher, and not only was the teacher wise, but also he imparted knowledge to the people. He pondered and searched out and set in order many proverbs. And you had heard me say before that the Proverbs are just a collection of disconnected thoughts. That's how it appears when you just read it on the front end. So, but after seeing this, that he says of himself, he says, I pondered and searched out and set in order many proverbs. And I said, so where's the order? What am I missing? And so I've been working on that when I've been coming and bringing things to you. And so today was probably the most obvious sense of order in a chapter that we've had up to this point in time. But he concluded his statement there: the teacher searched to find just the right words, and what he wrote was upright and true. So Solomon placed his Proverbs in a thoughtful order. The Proverbs look random at first, but chapter 15 has a clear order, a pattern about it. And it's not as much as it is a logical pattern as it is a portrait that he's painting. I called it a tapestry, a woven tapestry of ideas and thoughts that he brought together. But there's an order to them. And we'll see today Solomon's observations of the heart and behaviors of mankind, woven together with God's heart and His involvement in our lives. And it's a tapestry of our accountability to God, who sees and knows everything, and the extent of His grace and His mercy to us. And I have one more page I want to hand out to you here, because it's one of my visuals to you today. This is chapter 15 in color code. And there's some of the color may not be as obvious to you as it was to me on my computer screen, but you'll see here at the top, verses 1 and 2 are in red, and then verses 4 is red, verse 7 is red, and then I'm coming down, verse 23 on the other side is red, and then verse 28 is red, and the second half of verse 30. And all of those that are coded in red address the words that come out of our mouth, our speech, and it's observations about our behavior and how we say things, what we say, how we say it, the meaning in which we give to words. And so, but they're scattered throughout. As you can see, the red that's in here, it's scattered throughout the whole chapter. And then you'll see there's in verse 5, it's kind of a maroon color that's italic, and that has to do with how we respond to correction, discipline, rebuke in our lives that would come to us from God or from friends, from others. And we find that in verse 5 and in verse 10. And then we're coming down here in verse 31 and 32. You see they're coded in that way. And what I'm trying to show you here is that the subjects that we're looking at today, the speech, our heart and how it's reflected in our face, our contentment in life, there's our industry, our initiative that we take, and how we deal with criticism or correction in our life. And all of those are scattered throughout the chapter, but also throughout the chapter and in the places adjacent to the same subjects, we find the blue and bold, and those are the introduction of God in who He is and His posture concerning the behaviors of our life. And they also include His promises and what pleases Him, what He's looking for from us. And so here we have the character and behavior of mankind in a pattern throughout the whole chapter, and laced into the middle of all of it is the presence of God and His involvement in our heart and life. And that is a message all in itself. That whatever happens, whatever comes out of our life and heart, God is present and has thought concerning that. Not to take us down, but to lift us up. And that's the God who we know and love, and who loves us, and we've responded to. But this was as close as I could get to you, showing you a textual pattern. This is the tapestry I was looking for, but in content, that's helpful to you or not, but it was to me. And so I thought I'd give you that a start, at least. I'm going to start with a subject that the red, the bold red that was there in the text, but I'm back to your notes now, the 4 pages I gave you there. But I'm looking at verses 1 and 2. And Solomon addresses what comes out of our mouth. And he says in verse 1, "A gentle answer turns away wrath, but a harsh word stirs up anger." And in verse 2, "The tongue of the wise commends knowledge, but the mouth of the fool gushes folly." So he's addressing observations in life concerning speech. And he noted here that when someone speaks, gives a gentle answer to somebody, that it turns away wrath. When someone's coming at you angry about something and you respond with gentleness, it turns the wrath away and you can have a helpful conversation. But he says a harsh word, you come at me really angry about something, I'm going to go, "What's your problem anyway?" So I come back angry, you're just more angry. And I don't know you, but have you ever observed a conversation between two people, maybe even experienced it personally, where you see it just keeps building, the anger and the volatile conversation, until you're almost ready to fight each other or hit each other. And he said, all that can be turned aside if you just respond with gentleness. Now, how does one find the ability to respond with gentleness? Maybe it's if we were conscious of the fact that God was present, God is sovereign and has a good thing in store for us, that regardless of whatever it was I did, or was perceived that I did, that stirred up anger in somebody else, God knows about that, and He's got a resolve. And He calls on me to get along with everybody, as best as lies in me, to be at peace with my brothers and my sisters. And I've extended that beyond that. Carla will tell me I just need to learn how to do that when I'm driving, because that's probably well, and my computer, that'd be the other one. 2 sources of high irritation to me in life. Like driving here this morning, we came across the 60, came up to 57 to the 60, across the 605. On the 60, they were going 80 miles an hour. And there were cars doing 90, doing this, with cars in every lane coming across 60 this morning. I'm going, good grief, are we going to get there, or are we going to be behind an accident? You know, it was crazy. But Carla noticed my attitude because I talked to the cars. I'm talking to the drivers. You know, I have comments to make to them, but they aren't necessarily kind comments, and they probably certainly aren't gentle comments. And I said, that's an area in which I have need to grow. And I have need to grow in dealing with computer and software and stuff that just, I get an update and nothing else works anymore on my computer. You know, it's supposed to be full of things to be helpful to me, and all it does is shut my computer down. I'm going, what is this? And so I'm going back to paper and pencil and a tin can and a string. So it's really easier. Candles, light, and charcoal and parchment paper. I think there'd be less frustration in life. It doesn't work that way. It has something to do with the heart. We're going to get to that. But so we have observed that escalation of anger in a conversation. And we have also known and experienced, I think, a gentle response. And when I can respond with gentleness, I can then carefully clarify what it is that I have done or was perceived that I did or something that made somebody angry. Let's just, a friend of mine gave me a phrase, clarify, don't confront. Most confrontations can be resolved just clarifying what was experienced, what was perceived, and sometimes we do something we're not aware of, and when we hear it, we're sorry for that, and we can express that, and we can apologize and seek to reconcile the difficulty that we created. And in some cases, it's just clarifying the situation that it wasn't as they perceived it. It's okay. I'm taking a little time on this first part just to express that Solomon is making observations about human experience. And he wants to help us to respond in a way that's godly, that is righteous, that is pleasing to God, and produces good relationships between people. That's where he's headed in this whole chapter. So we look now at verse 4. And it says, the tongue that brings healing is a tree of life, but a deceitful tongue crushes the spirit. I said, if I can speak words that can heal in somebody, if it's a need to, if I can speak apology, if I can speak encouragement, if I can affirm somebody, if I can provide counsel that's helpful, those would be words that could potentially bring healing to somebody else or to a relationship, to a situation. But when that happens, that tongue is a tree of life, is the picture he's got. It says when someone can respond to people with those kinds of words, with a tongue that brings healing, that person is like a tree of life in the relationship. It's not a tree of death, it's a tree of life. He said, but a deceitful tongue, that which tells untruth, skews a situation into something more than it was. But someone who is deceitful in the words that they use crushes the spirit of other people. So words do make a difference. Be thoughtful about what you say and how you say it. Ask the question, what will resolve the conflict? What will lift those who are down? What will affirm the value of another person? I thought of myself as I read this. Ed, do you want to be a healer or a crusher? Of course I want to be a healer. And then I look at verse 7. The lips of the wise spread knowledge. Not so the hearts of the fools. The lips of the wise spread knowledge. Knowledge is information. They give information, but what makes that knowledge appropriate is that it's truthful. And so it's been helpful to me to, when I was looking at that, the lips of the wise person say things that are true. They speak knowledge that is true. It's not guessing. It's not shading, skewing what I'm saying, but it's speaking the truth. And I'm thinking of Ephesians chapter 4, where the instructions there called to the believers in Ephesus just said, speak the truth in love. there in chapter 4. It says, speak the truth in love. The lips of the wise spread knowledge. That's not so in the hearts of fools. They spread lies, deceit. They change the situations for whatever to create chaos in some cases, and in others just to punish somebody else by what they say. Verse 23, a man finds joy in giving an apt reply. When you say the words, the things that are helpful in a situation, there's a certain amount of joy that comes to that you're able to be helpful. You're able to contribute to the situation or to the other person. So there's a joy that comes in giving an answer that is helpful, an apt reply. And then how good is a timely word? We were at a gathering last night. In the city of Orange, we celebrate July 3rd. It's a City of Orange community thing that they do at the park, and they have combined church choirs that come together and they sing patriotic music and praises to God as well. And then all the politicians do their speech and thing too. But they honor all of the servicemen from military, and then they have a fireworks show, the prettiest elaborate fireworks show that happens there at the park. But anyway, it had nothing to do with what I'm saying. Last night we were at a gathering of friends prior to this celebration in the city. And Carla had sent a card of appreciation to one of the people at the gathering the week before. And just sent a card saying thank you for your service and what you do at the church and just your friendship. And she sent a very nice, kind card to it. And when we came into the house, he came up and gave Carla a really big hug and was tearful, saying, I can't tell you how much your words meant to me. They were just, that came at the right time. They were timely words. And that's it. We don't always know what that's going to be. What's the right time for some? Sometimes it's obvious to us, but sometimes it's just God's prompting in our heart. And I said, if you feel a prompting in your heart to do something that's good, do it. That's just a good posture to have in life. It may seem, well, I'm not sure if this is the right time, but I really think this is what I ought to say. This may not be, but if it seems right, do it. The worst that can happen is you have to apologize. But more often than not, when we say good things, they land at the right time and they are helpful to people. In verse 28, the heart of the righteous weighs its answers, but the mouth of the wicked gushes evil. That's the second time he's used that statement about the deceitful, that it gushes evil. And but the heart of the righteous, or the one who seeks to live rightly before God, the one who is declared righteous because of their faith in Christ and their trust and walk in Him. The heart of the righteous weighs the words he says before they come out of his mouth. He weighs the answers that he gives to people. Is this an appropriate answer? Is this a helpful answer? Is it an honest answer? Is it truthful? Is it the right thing to say? Weigh, consider, be thoughtful about the words we choose and use, because they make a difference. And it's the foolish one who doesn't care. Just say whatever I want to say, without regards to how it's going to land in somebody else's heart and mind. So you just want to be careful how you watch after your speech. That's what he's saying. And then I'm looking at verse 30. A cheerful look brings joy to the heart, and good news gives health to the bones. I'm looking at the second half of verse 30 here, because the first half is where we're going next, about the heart. But in the second half of verse 30, and good news gives health to the bones. When I can speak a good word to somebody, and that's the atmosphere in which you live at home. That's the atmosphere in which you work with other people. That it's a healthy place like that, and you're speaking good things. It's not always negative. It's not always down. It's not critical. It's not satisfied, but it's positive. That conversation is health to the bones. And I do know that when my heart is at ease, and I'm in a climate of positive conversation, positive work, it's contributing, that I am physically more healthy than I am in a critical situation. When it's an uncomfortable time, I just don't feel well. And so there is a connection between the environment we live in and what our health is. That's his statement here. Good news gives health to the bones. So bring good news to people. Well, those are the statements that he made in the chapter 15 here that relate to our mouth. The second subject area that's laced in all of this conversation that he's bringing in chapter 15 is the first half, begins with the first half of verse 30. A cheerful look brings joy to the heart. That when I'm with somebody and I'm up and I'm positive, I can lift, my presence lifts the other person. And it's just, and it has to do, when someone's really bum, and I can be this way, I'm really bum, tired, and things aren't going well, and I'm just grumpy, and I look down. I look sad. Now, that doesn't bring joy to anybody. But a cheerful look brings joy to the heart of the other person. It lifts them up. The thought came to me last night, and one moment I wake up during the night at times, and there was a thought in my head. And what the thought in my head was remembering as a junior high kid, new to church, and there for the first time, there was an older man in the congregation that was there. And I didn't know anybody at that point. We were new to the church. And I had just become a believer. And but this man was always grumpy. He always looked mad. He always looked like it was. I'm not talking about anybody, my family here. That could be a statement, but anyway, I'm not going there. But there was this man, and he always just looked down and angry. And as an innocent, ignorant junior high kid, I went to him once and I said, what's troubling you? And he said, nothing's troubling me. And I know these words aren't exact, but you're going to get the drift of it here. I said, well, you look really sad or angry. He says, no, I'm fine. I'm just fine inside. I'm happy. And my response from my mouth was, maybe you should let your face know it. And he laughed and smiled, and I said, oh, that's beautiful. And that's a crazy kid. Fritz. Okay. And that became a byword for us in conversation for years to follow. And he says, he'll come up to me and says, how am I doing? But a cheerful look brings joy to the heart. I'm looking at verse 13. A happy heart makes the face cheerful, but heartache crushes the spirit. You understand that distinction? The discerning heart seeks knowledge, but the mouth of a fool feeds on folly. And again, I'm looking at the word knowledge as what is true. It's looking to know, getting the information that is true. It says the discerning heart is seeking to understand. He's seeking to know. He's seeking the truth. Discerning heart. With the mouth of a fool, it just babbles on without regard to what's true or not true, or helpful or not helpful. And then in 15, all the days of the oppressed are wretched, but the cheerful heart has a continual feast. The one who chooses to be positive, the one who chooses to take a positive posture about life and about the situation and circumstances they're in, is the one who's going to be like at a banquet, having a feast. And the other one's going to be groveling in the gravel and just mud and unhappy. And he said, that's the oppressed. A face reflects what's in the heart. A happy heart, discerning heart, a cheerful heart makes a difference. Lift one's spirit, encourage, speak the truth, seek the truth and speak the truth, and then look for the positive and choose to embrace it and dismiss the negative. Those are just helpful thoughts that he gave here in terms of our character and our human experience and relationships. Verse 30, a cheerful look brings joy to the heart, and good news gives health to the bones. And I've already addressed you with that. In relation to this thought of a cheerful heart, I was reminded of a statement that Paul made to the Thessalonians. To the Philippians. I'll go there first. Philippians chapter 4, verses 4 through 7 says this: rejoice in the Lord always. Again, I will say, rejoice. And let your gentle spirit be known to all men. The Lord is near. That could be near like coming, or near like present. Be anxious for nothing, but in everything by prayer and supplication with thanksgiving, let your requests be made known to God. And the peace of God, which surpasses all comprehension, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus. How do I be a positive person? How do I rejoice in all things? Rejoice always. Well, pray about everything. Talk to God about what's in your heart, what you're concerned about, what you don't know, what you don't understand, what's not right, what's going well. And be quick to give him thanks and praise for the things that you can rejoice over. Rejoice in the Lord always, and pray about everything. Those are heart changers. Those are attitude changers for me. And I think for all of us when we practice those. I have trouble with the words always and every, because they just don't fit my life. I can't. How do you get rejoice in the Lord always? Well, if I have an upset stomach, that's really hard to rejoice in. You know? When someone has said something that's really cruel and not true about me, that's hard to rejoice in. But he didn't just say rejoice when you can. It says rejoice always. And that's why I said I don't like that word always. There's an obligation in there somewhere. But that's the right choice to make. If I rejoice in difficulties, I've often said that James was skewed in his mental behavior. And he said that because we can rejoice in tribulation and difficulty. And I'm going, oh really? But we can if we have the posture of difficulties creating character in me that is like God. Difficulty in me is creating a person who can be observed by others and how they trust God and how they allow God to be a part of their life. It's a model of their life. And those are choices we make. said, but when I choose to trust in God's promises, I'm free to take joy in every situation. When I pray about everything, I do experience His peace. When I pray with thanksgiving, Lord, this is my request, and I know you've got an answer, and I know you're at work in this. It's the thanksgiving part. There's faith engaged in that, and that faith frees me from the bondage of difficulty. When I pray about everything, I do experience His peace. Paul said to the Thessalonians in his first letter, 1 Thessalonians chapter 5, verse 16, he said this, rejoice always, same thing that he had to say to the Philippians. And then he said, pray without ceasing, just like he said to the Philippians, in everything, pray. And then the third thing he said was, in everything, give thanks. For this is God's will for you in Christ Jesus. So He expects us that joy would come out of our heart, our life, always, and that we would take the time and initiative to pray without ceasing, pray about everything, and in everything give thanks. That's hard for me. Again, it's the every part that's difficult. There's some things I don't have any trouble giving thanks for. The difficulties are hard. But he said in everything, give thanks. And when I find the ability to stop and say, enough, I am grateful, Lord, that you were here. I'm grateful that you know about what's going on, and I know that you care, and I know you're at work here. And I just want to thank you for that. Please give me the grace to endure. Give me the strength to stay in there with you. So, can I give thanks in everything? And I said, yep. And it's His will for us. And then the next characteristic here that's in this woven texture I'm giving to you here today is the heart of contentment. And as an introduction to that, Paul said to the Philippians, also in chapter 4, Philippians 4:11, he says of himself, I have learned to be content whatever the circumstances. I know what it is to be in need. I know what it is to have plenty. I have learned the secret of being content in any and every situation, whether well-fed or hungry, whether living in plenty or in want. I can do everything through Him who gives me strength. That's the secret he was speaking of. He was conscious of God's presence, and I can do everything in His strength. And then Solomon expressed it this way in verse 6, and we're looking here in chapter 15. Verse 6, the house of the righteous contains great treasure, but the income of the wicked brings them trouble. So the household of the person who is living rightly, seeking to live rightly, and living in a relationship granted to us by Christ, the house of the righteous contains a great treasure. There's contentment and there's peace in that house. But the income of the wicked brings them trouble. Now, that could come in one of two ways, I was thinking here. The income of the wicked is I don't have enough. And I'm always in trouble because I'm scrambling to get something, everywhere. And there's no trust involved in life. It's all on my back, and So, the income of the wicked brings trouble if they don't have it. And on the other hand, for the wicked, if they have too much, it creates trouble. I'll let that sit where it is. In verse 16, the next one comes down about contentment. Better a little with fear of the Lord than great wealth with turmoil. And I think that speaks for itself, but if I'm conscious of God's presence and I'm respect for Him, and that even a little is okay. We've learned how to do that in life. Verse 17, better a meal of vegetables where there is love than a fattened calf with hatred. So is there a house with love or a house with hatred? You know, even having a carrot where there's love is better than a full roasted calf when there's hatred in the house. All related to contentment again. Can I be content in the Lord? Can I be content in the love that's present with us? Trust in God and love. Or have turmoil and hatred. And those are choices we make in our life. Verse 27, a greedy man brings trouble to his family, but he who hates bribes will live. A greedy man will typically create a household of debt. Or stinginess. Can come either way there. But a greedy man brings trouble to his family, but he who hates bribes, financial obligation that comes as a prompt. And the thought that came to my mind in this description, he who hates bribes will live. I remember when we went to buy a car, and when we went in, we said, this is how much money we have. We've already examined our budget. We know what we can put down, and we know how much we can afford by the month, along with the taxes and insurance and stuff that would come. We know what our limits are. And he wanted to take us beyond our limits. And he said, I'll tell you what, I'll throw a telephone in. I'll give you a free telephone. This was before cell phones, okay? So it's a few years ago, 40. But anyway, he said, do you want to retract that last statement? Because that's enough to tell me I don't want to buy from you. Don't bribe me with cheap stuff. I'm buying a car. And what are you talking about a phone for? Anyway, I was not, you remember that conversation. And he apologized and backed off, and we got the car for what we said we could pay, so it was a good thing. But I was really irritated by a bribe that came in. It says, he who's careful and understands when you're being bribed is going to do better in life and bring less trouble to the family. Timothy, Paul, in his first letter to Timothy, in chapter 6, verse 6, says this, but godliness with contentment is great gain. For we brought nothing into the world, and we can take nothing out of it. But if we have food and clothing, we will be content with that. People who want to get rich fall into temptation and a trap and into many foolish and harmful desires that plunge men into ruin and destruction. For the love of money is a root of all kinds of evil. Some people, eager for money, have wandered from the faith and pierced themselves with many griefs, not content with what they have, but a passion to have more. And what's curious to me in observing in life, the one who doesn't have enough never has enough. My need is met. Well, I have this, but it's not enough. I need more. It's that passion, that drive that creates another whole issue for us. I say money can be a factor in contentment. That's what Solomon's been addressing so far. But I said, so can uncontrolled temper be a factor in contentment. In verse 18 it says, a hot-tempered man stirs up dissension, but a patient man calms a quarrel. This is real close to what we looked at the last time I was with you, and that's Proverbs 14, verse 29. A patient man has great understanding, but a quick-tempered man displays folly. A heart at peace gives life to the body. Again, contentment brings health. And then the next subject that's woven into all of this is the wise, the wisdom. In verse 20, a wise son brings joy to his father, but a foolish man despises his mother. And this takes us back to the fifth of the 10 great commandments, to honor your father and your mother. It's the first commandment with a promise that you may live long. And Proverbs 15 provides 3 more observations to us here. Verse 21, folly delights a man who lacks judgment. Foolish behavior is a pleasure to the one who doesn't understand and lacks good judgment. But a man of understanding keeps a straight course in his life, and there'll be pleasure in that. Verse 22, plans fail for the lack of counsel, but with many advisors they succeed. Well, in the context that will follow in this, we find that the wise one looks for counsel, looks for wise counsel, and the foolish man doesn't listen. So the wise will look for good counsel and have good judgment. In verse 24, the path of life leads upward for the wise to keep him from going down to the grave. For the wise, life has a positive view ahead of it. And I think it keeps him from going down to the grave, since grants him life. Good wisdom extends life. I suppose you could look at that statement and say that a wise person will be responsive to God, and that will keep him from going to hell. And then there's just one verse that addresses the subject of initiative, being industrious in our life. Verse 19. The way of the sluggard is blocked with thorns, but the path of the upright is a highway. And the picture I saw in this was that the sluggard, the lazy one, is, we've seen that phrase, the statement sluggard and lazy in all the chapters here in Proverbs before, chapters 3, 4, 5, 6, where speak of the laziness and the sluggard. But here the way of the sluggard is blocked with thorns. And I thought, well, he's too lazy to keep the weeds out of his life. And he can't function because his life is all encumbered with all this stuff. He's too lazy to take care of it. But through the path of the upright, the one who keeps his life clean, stays focused on the things of value, has a straight path and a highway to run on. And then I'm here at the point of the bold blue in our tapestry is the interlacing of truth concerning God as He relates to us in living our lives, in the things and the subjects